Thank you, Chair, fellow Toastmasters. Plant a thought, reap an action. Plant an action, reap a habit. Plant a habit, reap your character. Plant your character, and reap your destiny. Fellow Toastmasters, today I'm finally going to do my icebreaker speech in front of you so you guys have a better idea of who I am and where I'm coming from. And I like to divide my topic into two parts today. One part is the challenge that I faced once I initiated my journey away from my parents and how I had to struggle to overcome the emotional as well as the logistics of just moving out on my own. And second, I like to talk about the realizations I had along the way. And lastly, I like to summarize it with a quote from Sir James Allen. Okay, first, after graduating from university, I had no idea why I was so depressed. I mean, I had everything that I could need. I had a house, I had a good job, I had my own car, I had my own place to live. Like, I had everything that a guy could ever need. And it wasn't like I was starving, I had financial issues, I had everything I needed, but I felt so empty when I was moving out, and I was alone in my apartments. And I tried to figure out why. I wake up in the morning, and immediately I'll feel anxious that I was gonna feel depressed, anxious about depression. And I'll eat my breakfast, go to my car, go to work, talk with my coworkers, but everything I talked with my coworkers felt really empty. It was just like, it was so superficial, and there was no substance behind it. And I would counsel with my patients, like the way I learned it in school, how to actually counsel drug therapy, but it almost felt mechanical when I was doing it. And so I would go back home, do some salsa dancing, and I still felt like there was no purpose in my life. I didn't know why I was doing the thing I was doing. I was kind of lost. And every night I would start thinking about questions like, why are you here in this world? What's your purpose in life? And those are the questions that kept on coming up. I couldn't ignore it. So I like to talk about what I learned along the way. There's a saying, like, help yourself to little self-help. And over the past year, I've been helping myself to a lot of self-help. I was listening to Anthony Robbins, reading books on Michael Hall's Mind Lines, to see how the human mind worked. I went to, I don't know how many seminars I went to. I watched a lot of seminars at home. Kelsey even saw my alarm's a seminar. So I started learning a lot about who I am, what I'm supposed to do, and this is what I found. Some of the most profound things that I found. Once by Michael Hall, Mind Lines. And this guy talked about how whenever we have an idea about the world, we call it frame. And whenever we have a frame, we would look at reality, delete, distort, and generalize reality to support that frame. Whether that frame is positive or negative doesn't matter, but that's how our mind works. So the interesting thing that I learned was that you can have frames about frames. So I was feeling really depressed, and so I'll delete and distort and generalize reality to support why I feel depressed. That was my filter of the world, and that's what I realized. And the fact that I felt so depressed, I felt guilty about my depression, and I'll delete, distort, and generalize reality about why I should feel guilty. So what Michael Hall said was, do it in a positive way. So I said, okay, I want to feel curious about the fact that I'm guilty, about the fact that I'm depressed. So I'm curious. And it got interesting because I started to realize oh, I feel different when I start thinking that way. and I'm actually in an analysis mode, and then I start to feel happy about the fact that I can be curious about my guilty of being, depressed. And so, like, I felt different. Like, when I saw it that way, I was like, oh, that's really profound. Another thing that I learned was from Anthony Robbins, and he talked about how our emotions are basically controlled by three things. Basically, our physiology, the language we talk to ourselves, and the questions that we ask. So one of the quick things that I learned was, like, if you look up and raise your arms like this, and started thinking, well, what do you have so that's gratifying in your life? I found that to be very instant mood changer, because it's impossible for you to cry when you're actually doing this. When you're actually really pouring your eyes out and you lift your arms and look up, you start crying, and once you start thinking about, like, oh, what do I have that's grateful in my life, you start feeling different right away. And another really profound book was Tuesdays with Morrie, and in that book I learned about how it's basically a story about a dying professor teaching his student before he dies about the life lessons that he learned. And what that book made me realize was, it made me recognize my own mortality. And I was reminded that in the fleeting time we have in this earth, it's not a matter of wealth, power, status, or even fame, but really how well we loved each other. And about what small part we played in making how other people's lives better. That's what it all comes down to. And I found that to be very profound and helped me shape my character in that sense. So, thoughts, action, habits, and character eventually is the destiny. Man's life is made and unmade by his thinking. In the armory of thought, he forges the weapons by which he destroys himself. He also fashions the tools which he builds heavenly mansions of strength, joy, and peace. By the right choice and true application of thought, man ascends to divine perfection. By the abuse and wrong choice of thought, he descends below the level of the beast. Between these two extremes are all grades of character, and man is both their chooser and master. And of all the beautiful truth pertaining to the soul, which has been restored and brought to light in this age, none is more gladdening or fruitful of divine promise and confidence than this: that man is the master of thoughts, the molder of character, and therefore the maker and shaper of his environment, condition, and destiny. Check.